with the possible exception of myself, so likes to get in a vehicle and drive across this great country. He adores it. It energizes him and restores him. He can take out a map of the United States and discuss in detail what it's like on that particular two-lane road in Texas, or over here in Kentucky, or in Nevada, because he's been there and he remembers it. But the real key to Ernie Hebert is not his wanderlust, his intense curiosity about our country and its people. It's the way he always has come back to Keene in the Monadnock region. He once rode a motorcycle, actually it was more of a scooter than a motorcycle, from New Orleans home to Keene, and ended up having to push that thing up the final hill out of Winchester so he could return to his hometown. He has never forgotten where his roots are, what his background was, the people he knew growing up. He comes back to them again and again. He remembers them. And by remembering them, he honors them. And therein lies the greatness of his novels. In a time when the average person, the working man, the woman with 2 jobs or no job, the guy with dirt in his fingernails, maybe a couple of decaying automobiles in his front yard, in a time when they have somehow tragically become invisible in the media and in our politics, and equally invisible in our literature, Ernie has never forgotten them. He has put them at the very heart of his many novels. People like Howard Ellman, probably his most enduring character in a long list of enduring and memorable characters. And that's why I believe that many years from now, like Terry, the literature he has created, with its roots so deeply embedded in Keene and the Monadnock region, will not be forgotten. That first summer that we met in 1971, for my birthday that year, I won't tell you how old I was then, Ernie gave me a splitting wedge and a piece of elmwood, along with a quote from Heman Chase of Alstead about the difficulty of turning a piece of elm into a piece of firewood. It's a tough wood, the wood that gave the Elm City its nickname. It's full of twists, interconnected fibers, complicated, frustrating to deal with sometimes, always tenacious. The kind of wood people often overlook in favor of the more beautiful maple, or straight-grained oak, or the flexible birch that gives out such a sizzle when it burns, or the easy-to-handle poplar, which you learn very quickly doesn't give off much heat at all. The elm wood doesn't so much burn as smolder. As I said, a tough wood that just doesn't want to give up, to be consumed or discarded. It's also now endangered, or at least extremely rare. Ernie, this native of the Elm City, is an elm, a proud elm.
Thank you, Dayton. The Mayor of Keene, the Honorable Kendall Lane.
My first experience with Ernie was a number of years ago. He was writing a column for the Boston Globe, and I got mentioned by reference in that column as a very naive young individual who he wondered why I was getting involved in public life. Lots happened since then. On behalf of the city of Keene, I want to welcome Ernie back, a native son that we've all appreciated, that we've all followed for a number of years, and we all enjoy having here. I have a proclamation on behalf of the city that I'd like to read. Joseph Ernest Vacarest Hebert. Ernie Hebert was born May 4th, 1941 in Keene, New Hampshire. He completed 8 years of schooling at St. Joe's Elementary School in Keene. Ernie went to Keene High School, where he graduated in the lower part of his class in 1959. And whereas Ernie joined the Army Reserves, served 6 months on active duty in 1959, and an additional year when he was called back in 1961 for the Berlin Wall crisis. And whereas at age 21, Ernie began a lifelong passion of reading American history, art history, and literary fiction. During this period, 2 close friends encouraged him to reapply to college. And whereas Ernie enrolled at Keene State College, then Keene Teachers College, in 1963, during his freshman year, he made the president's list and was tied with a senior for the highest average in the school. His first published piece was in the Keene Sharper News. And whereas Ernie graduated from Keene State in 1969 and went on to Stanford University Writing Center, where he was accepted as into the literary section by the English poet Donald Davy. At Stanford, Ernie studied under Davy and the American novelist Wallace Stegner, and decided to switch his career goals from poetry to fiction. And whereas Ernie worked from 1972 to 1981 as a reporter for the Keene Sentinel, where he won 3 journalism awards from New England United Press International. Ernie also worked briefly for the Business New Hampshire magazine and the New Hampshire Times, and for several years wrote a weekly column for the Boston Globe, including 1 year for the Globe Sunday magazine. And whereas Ernie began his college teaching career in 1985 at Keene State, in 1988 he joined the faculty at Dartmouth College and has been there ever since. He's the only fiction writer to be granted tenure at Dartmouth, and for the last 3 years he has served as Director of Creative Writing at Dartmouth. And whereas Ernie published his first novel, The Dogs of March, in 1979, he has gone on to publish 11 books, including 9 novels. 4 of his novels have won prizes for excellence. Ernie was the 2002 winner of the Sarah Josepha Hale Award in recognition of a distinguished body of work in the field of literature and letters. In 2006, he was named Fiction Writer of the Year in New England by the New England Booksellers Association. And whereas Ernie's latest novel, Never Back Down, is his first that is consciously autobiographical and is set mainly in Keene and Granite Lake in Stoddard, and tells the story of a Franco-American working man over a lifetime. Now there be it resolved that I, Kendall W. Lane, Mayor of the City of Keene, do hereby extend the official congratulations of the City of Keene to Joseph Ernest Vacares Hebert, and ask that all citizens of Keene join me in saluting him for his outstanding contributions to our community and wish him continued success. Further, I do hereby proclaim Saturday, September 8th, 2012 as Ernie Hebert Day in Keene, and extend to him all the privileges inherent with Ernie Hebert Day.
Well, I tell you, this has been really nice. I can't do any better than these guys. And I see some people in the audience that have so many of you out there that I've known, and in particular, 2 people stick out. That's Barbara Morrissey from Sullivan. John Morrissey, her husband, was one of my first mentors, and a great man, great writer. And well, there's a whole bunch of you out there that I'm just totally in love with. And in particular, like Bob Perot from Manchester, who made me, what's that phrase, raise my consciousness of my French Canadian background. So the two of you really, you're not on the talk, but you mean a lot to me. I want to talk today about Keene people who meant something to me. That's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to leave out all my friends and mentors at Keene State College because that's another 15 pages, and I thought I'd just stick with I'd talk to you as a townie, which is what I am. I framed the talk as a kind of before and after, and I'm going to start with after and then go back to before. I came of age as a writer when I worked for the Keene Sentinel from 1972 to 81. And during that time, I formed two enduring friendships. And you've already met those two guys. I was going to talk about them a little bit, but since Jack has already done that job, I'm going to skip and just say one thing. The only thing that Terry and Dayton have in common is that they're both smarter than I am. I'm so grateful for their friendship over 4 decades. And I'm a lucky guy that way. I love working for the Sentinel, especially the camaraderie in the newsroom. It was a privilege to work with what was a very talented writing staff. Maybe some of these names will ring a bell for you. Besides Dayton, it was Tom Ferreter and Joan Terry, who today are a married couple. Peter Fossel, Tom Hanna, Kip Weeks, Pat Haley, Charlie Kenny, Kevin Lowther. Later there was Guy McMillan, Kathy Cox, Steve Gordon, Eric Aldridge, and Don Wade, who took my place on the sports desk. My immediate boss was the news editor, Tom Carney. Tom's greatest gift was infusing a feeling that news gathering was not only important, but fun. Frank Bondorler was the managing editor, and his forte was bringing a sense of calm and stability to what was a lot of wild and crazy people. And then there was Ken Zwicker, who was the heart and soul of the Sentinel, as far as I'm concerned. Ken had a way of coming up to you. He'd find a moment when you were vulnerable, and he'd say, Dayton, you think we'll ever amount to anything? Or he said to me, Ernie, you think we'll ever amount to anything? And he'd catch you, and it would just kind of take the air out of you. He's a great man. But the person I'm most grateful to at the Sentinel was Bert Rafford, the sports editor. My first boss at the paper. I spent 2 years in sports, and Bert made a newspaper man out of me. He had a clear and general way of editing. He'd tell me almost exactly how long a story should be. Give me 10 inches or 6 inches or whatever, the column inches. That's how we measure. And when he'd correct my writing, he'd only say one thing. He never confused me by saying 8 or 9 things, which is what Carney used to do. He used to drive me crazy. But Bert would say one thing, which he could remember, And it's a technique that I've used with my Dartmouth students. Especially when a paper's all screwed up, I'll just tell the kid one thing, and they can cure that, But mainly, he always supported me when this coach or that coach was mad at me. And believe me, if you're covering local sports, there's always somebody who's mad at you. I don't think it's any coincidence that myself, Don Wade, who went on to be to a career as an author and a writer for Golf Digest, and Paul Miller, now managing editor and columnist for the Sentinel, we all got our start with Bert Rafford. So he's a great editor, great man. When I was a reporter, your mayor, Kendall Lane, was just coming in on the political scene. He's part of a long tradition of local-grown, smart, dedicated public servants. If there's one thing I learned covering Keene as a newspaper reporter, it's that this town is lucky in its leadership. There's no big-time corruption. There's no machine here. There's just guys and women trying to do their best for the community. I think that's the bottom line for Keene government. Makes it kind of boring to write about, you know, you really want. I really wish there was something a little more spectacular out there. Keene's always had a vibrant literary life, and today I'm happy to say that the literary life continues with Among the Elms, the writers group started by Kathy Medvedovsky. And I want to express my gratitude to Kathy and to a spin-off from that group, my own all-male writing buddies, the Fubarians, Dave Chase and Jack Hitchner, whose books you'll find for sale at reasonable prices on the Kindle platform, Sean McKinney, the radio DJ who brought us all together, and new friends Norm Klein, Ken Shalhoub, and Jack Curley. I'd like to go back now to that old life before Keene State, before I committed to the literary life. Let's start with my first taste of literary notoriety. I'm about 12 years old, can't remember the exact age. I'm hanging out with my pal, Mike Saunders. He's still around, right? We're playing with a kid's printing press I received for Christmas, or maybe he got it. I can't remember who got the printing press. And I remember that it took us forever to make the thing work. But eventually we did it. And we printed up some flyers that said, the Mike and Ernie Detective Agency. And we put our parents' phone numbers on there. And we distributed them all across the east side. The phone calls started coming in. My parents were at first puzzled, then upset, and finally, I think, amused, because the scolding I received was relatively mild. What I got out of this episode was that as a writer, you're bound to get some criticism, but also some attention, and ultimately a kind of secret satisfaction out of the creative process itself. It's that feeling that keeps me writing today. Around the same time, I became an avid reader of comic books. Around age 12, I wanted something more realistic and deeper from my reading. I found that in Keene Public Library. And I would go there every Saturday, ostensibly to study. But what I really loved to do was just wander around and look at the books. I liked the way they felt, and I liked the smell, and I would just take them out. And I discovered, I can't remember the name of the book now, but it had my name in it, Ernest. It was, Keene Library became a kind of holy place to me. I've always been a lousy Catholic, and I could never enjoy myself in church. But the library, that was the temple for me. Well, one Saturday, I was sitting at a study table, which I think is called the Thayer Room. Now, when a girl about my own age plunked herself down beside me, I didn't know who she was, and she annoyed me. I didn't have much use for or knowledge of girls in those days. I had no sisters. There were no girls my age in my neighborhood, and in my school, St. Joe's, girls sat on one side of the room, boys on the other, and the playgrounds were segregated by gender. I really had no clue how to relate to a girl, so I did not try to relate to the girl. What happened was the girl related to me. She started talking to me, and the next thing I knew, we were discussing the books we were reading. The conversation gave me a kind of thrill. In the end, the girl recommended I read a Nancy Drew mystery. I was too embarrassed to take a book out of the library that was about a girl. So I asked her to do it for me. And so she took the book out under her name, gave me the book, and then I would read the book and bring it back to her and give it to her next Saturday. This went on for, I'm not sure how long, a fair amount of time. And the only relationship we had was in that library on Saturday at the table talking about books. There was nothing else. That was it. I didn't see her outside. it was just, that was it. I can remember that I saw her years later, but then something happened, I can't remember what. Anyway, she stopped going to the library, or I stopped, and I just never saw her again until high school, when I'd see her occasionally in the corridors. And by that time, she was out of my league. She was just much too beautiful for someone like me. And I never said a word to her. And it was not till decades later that I realized that the girl had done something for me. With her, I began to associate the reading life with conversation and gender equality. With the approach of our 50th high school reunion, I wanted to meet up with this girl, now a grown woman, and just give her a simple thank you. It never happened. I learned that she had died. Her name was Connie Priest. Thank you, Connie, wherever you are. I was not a very good high school student. In fact, I almost flunked English my junior year, which very well might have impelled me to quit education altogether. Last day of school, and I have to stay after, courtesy of my English teacher and nemesis, Miss Helen McCoffey. Does that name ring a bell for anybody out here? Yeah. We had four terms in those days. I had 2 D's and an F, and if I got one more F, it meant I would have flunked English. And probably I don't know. I might have just gone to work in the shop. But Miss McCoffey